Hello, and welcome to Bigger Possibilities, a podcast from Schultz and Williams, where we explore what's possible for nonprofit organizations and the world through leadership, purpose, progress, and impact. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by my friend and colleague, former colleague, Anna Shurak, who is the Executive Director of Teach for America, Greater Philadelphia. Welcome, Anna. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Renee.
Yeah, it's great. It's great to see you. Well, when we talk about leadership, I always like to begin at the beginning, right? Tell me a little bit about your leadership journey and what brought you to lead this wonderful organization here in the Greater Philadelphia region.
Yeah, thanks so much. So, when I think of my leadership journey, well, we could go way back to when I was a kid and crazy stories my mom would tell about me when I'm little. I think I'll fast forward a bit. Post-college, I studied education policy and political science at Indiana University in Bloomington. And I knew I wanted to do ed policy, but I didn't want to work on ed policy until I taught. And so I applied to Teach for America actually way back when and was accepted and placed with Teach for America in North Philadelphia. And so I taught 8th grade at Fitzsimons High School. And at that time, I had the wonderful opportunity of being placed with a dynamite leader, Dr. Linda Clyatt-Wayman, who really showed me what was possible through change and having committed adults aligned to what needs to happen for kids. And so while policy was still always on my mind, at that time, I realized we need great people in buildings too. And so I ended up staying in my placement school for about 12 years, serving in a variety of roles. Ultimately serving as principal. And I think when I think of my leadership journey, one thing that rings true is I didn't always see myself as the leader. You know, Mrs. Wayman said to me when I was a teacher, why don't you go get your principal certification? And now I look back, this was a terrible thing to say to my boss. I said, why would I ever want to do that? Your job looks terrible. But, you know, oftentimes I think leaders are follow their path based on the encouragement and mentorship of others. And so through that experience, I went on to lead high schools in Camden and then come back to lead Teach for America about 7 years ago. And so I'm very honored to be in this role now and continue to learn and grow every day.
Wow. That is incredible. It does seem like a very hard job to be a principal. Was there one thing that you took away from being in that seat, in the principal seat, that has kind of stayed with you in your leadership style? I imagine there's lots of things, but anything kind of come to mind that really stands out?
Yeah, I think one thing that really stood out to me in that experience was, you know, I was very young when I became principal, and I followed a larger-than-life, amazing leader who had been from our community and was transitioning to a different role. And I think for that beginning of that role, I really just tried to emulate Mrs. Wayman versus just wearing my own shoes instead of being worried about filling hers. And I think that has stuck with me over the years of how can I be a leader and be authentic to myself while also taking away great lessons from anyone that I really learn from or see amazing leadership lessons through them.
Yeah, so smart. I can't imagine how, challenging that role must have been. And, speaking of challenges, the education landscape is challenging, right? We can't pretend it's not. What is it that, gives you hope that the long-term systems change and the things that we want to see be true for our children in education are really possible? What's giving you hope?
Yeah. So what always gives me hope is what I experienced in North Philadelphia, that once we were working towards a common goal for kids, our high school became the highest performing comprehensive high school in Philadelphia. Our college going culture and metrics were on track with the special admits. And we did the same thing in Camden when we had a team, and I led the team leading high schools there. And so once you know it's possible, once I know it's possible, I can't see it any other way.
Yeah.
I would offer though, Renee, it's incredibly difficult. You have to have a lot of pieces in place, but even changing the life of one student through ensuring they have access to an excellent education and are graduating well prepared makes a difference and gives me inspiration, and then what's possible as a result of that person's path.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I know when you see that success story of one child, it does kind of just spur that, inspiration to keep going, right? Because it is possible. So tell us, most folks know that Teach for America is a national organization, and we have our local affiliate, if you will, here in the greater Philadelphia region. What's it like to be a part of that kind of network with so many alumni and so many other incredible leaders doing the work in the classroom, outside of the classroom, leading this incredible network of change makers?
Yeah. First of all, it's just an honor, Renee. Like every time you hear of excellent change in districts, in schools, in systems, it's usually Teach for America alum working alongside other dedicated educators or community members. And so to be able to learn of those examples across the country just blows me away constantly. And, I think of actually a friend of mine, Charlie Friedman. He's a principal in Nashville now. He was a Teach for America core member and alum, and worked in Philadelphia for a long time. Mm-hmm. He just posted and shared yesterday he now has the highest third grade reading scores in the entire state of Tennessee, and leading his school above 80% proficiency. And so that's just one example of relevance of how our work makes a difference in children's lives and in communities, and being able to have line of sight across the country into those excellent examples of success and of hope really just keeps me inspired and learning all the time.
It's great. And also, I always think back knowing about the origins of Teach for America, how it started literally with an idea, over 35 years ago from the incredible founder and leader, Wendy Kopp. Where do you see TFA going now in this, after 35 years, right? That's a long time. Some nonprofits don't even make it to 10 or 5 years, right? This really started off as a completely kind of grassroots bootstrap effort. And now look where the organization is. Tell us a little bit about where TFA is today and what kind of impact you're looking to make in the next 10 years or the next 35.
Yeah, that's a great question, Renee. And oftentimes I didn't fully understand as a nonprofit leader how that can be a little bit challenging, because our value proposition at Teach for America hasn't changed. We believe that all students deserve the opportunity for an excellent education, and that we recruit young, talented folks to come into the classroom for 2 years and either stay or go on to tackle systems change in whatever way makes the most sense to them, but has been informed by their experience. And from my perspective, that's not always, people want a quick fix to things. Having change and tackling structural issues that plague our schools is not something that changes overnight. And so from my perspective, Teach for America is needed now more than ever, given some of the challenges that we're seeing in our education system and across our country, because we need our young people to be well educated, to be on a path towards economic mobility, and to be able to navigate and compete in an increasingly global world and environment. And so Teach for America's relevance, schools aren't going away. As I always say, the kids are coming tomorrow, whether the adults are there or not. It's just, right? And so how do we continue to evolve? What we're really focused on is how do we prepare our educators and work with the educator force to incorporate responsibly great tools like AI, and to be nimble and be able to respond. How do we continue to think of different school models that really support best practices for kids, and then just continue to push on the systems that allow our teachers to stay in education. Teaching is still one of the most underpaid professions that we had. It's increasingly difficult to get teachers to come to the classroom. And even with it, we're very proud in Philadelphia. Our recruitment's up about 40% across the country. In Philly, we've grown the corps from 50 teachers a few years ago to we'll have 160 this fall.
Wow.
We are only able to meet that need if we're also working on and impacting the conditions our educators are navigating.
Yep, for sure. What do you think is the hardest part of your job as an executive director? Because it is a lot of things to a lot of people, right? It's the buck often stops with you. What do you find is the biggest challenge in that role? And you've been doing it for 7 years, so I'm sure that's long. But
I think the hardest thing at times is sticking to the plan. I know that sounds sort of intuitive. Of course, we stick to a plan, but in Greater Philadelphia, our goal is that twice as many students in city council districts 3, 5, and 7 double their proficiency and third grade reading and are on a path towards economic mobility. And there are so many different ways that we can influence education, and that we have gotten really clear our role is in influencing and working towards education. For us, we're excellent at talent. We're great at bringing people into the profession and training them. We're also really working on our high dosage tutoring and our talent, bringing in more folks to high dosage tutoring and supporting our schools. We work in coalition to do that work, and then we support our alumni in doing their work through various initiatives. It's taken me a while, 7 years, to get really crystal clear on we can't be everything to everyone. What is our unique value add, and how do we stay the course in delivering and being excellent to be able to have impact for kids in those areas? And so I think that is one thing that's always on my mind. And I would also say by staying in the course, I think pushing myself to not be complacent. 7 years in at leaving, it's easy to just sort of sit back and things are moving along. But if we really want the kind of change that we aspire to, that's not an option. So how do I continue to learn and grow and up the ante for myself and our team?
Yeah. And what I've admired about TFA, and full disclosure to our listeners out here, I formerly worked at TFA, so you and I were once colleagues. But what I always found inspirational about Teach for America was their ability to innovate and keep innovating in their practices around recruitment of teachers, right? Number one, because it's challenging. You shared earlier that it's not a high paid profession, right? People are not chomping at the bit to do teaching these days. And so the innovation really inspired me. And I know that recently you mentioned the high dosage tutoring. That's a recent innovation. Tell us how, you brought that to life here in the Greater Philadelphia region and what that actually looks like for students.
Yeah, so our Ignite tutoring program at Teach for America was born out of our Phoenix region in COVID, and really our executive director, Katie Tennyson, responding to the need of alum principals at the time that really needed more support for their students when everyone was virtual. And what it is, and it's grown, is that we use at Teach for America our talent infrastructure across the country to recruit college students who apply and are selected and are paid to be virtual tutors to our partner schools. And what it allows is if a school signs up to have our Ignite program, they're then able to provide students virtual tutoring every single day in a consistent manner that fits into their schedule and is addressing the needs of their students through their school's curriculum. And we've seen amazing results in students making great gains for their own academic goals, but also really benefiting from the near peer experience of being tutored by a college student. And so what we've also seen is we have great core members, our teachers, coming into the classroom now that were introduced to teaching through the Ignite Fellowship that they then saw, hey, I can do this. So I think of one of our alum now, Sherry Sledge, she came into Teach for America after being an Ignite tutor and then taught at Potter Thomas before transitioning to alumnihood. And so that's been really great to see, just the full circle moments of folks getting involved. And then in Philly, we have started out in a smaller number of schools, about 4. But we actually have just finalized that we'll be partnering with the school district and the mayor's office to have Ignite in the EY schools, extended day, extended year schools next year, and 7 of them. So we're growing quite exponentially next year.
That's great.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, wow, that is incredible to hear that, something is really working to improve literacy scores and reading. It's so essential. And you mentioned, it was born out of responding to the need. What do educators need right now? They're leaders in the classroom. What do you see that they need the most right now?
I think a few things really come to mind. I think one is, educators right now need to feel respected in a lot of levels. I think COVID gave folks an insight into what it is to be an educator, and quickly many have lost that, and that becomes increasingly challenging. And so what does it look like to have your profession respected and for you to feel valued?
Sure.
I think from a social emotional side, it is difficult these days in any profession, but to go and be your full self and show up for a classroom of students and be, filling so many different roles beyond a teacher every day takes a lot of emotional resilience. And I see that more and more with our teachers of just needing more social emotional support for themselves and in working with their students. And I think educators, if you have an opportunity, if anyone's listening, to celebrate a educator or say thank you to an educator, I think sometimes the smallest compliments and or just shows of with gratitude to our teachers and educators makes a really big difference, because it is a difficult job.
That is for sure. There's no doubt. Gosh, well, we've covered a lot of ground already, but what do you see as, our podcast is called Bigger Possibilities. What do you see as bigger possibilities for TFA? What's the next frontier?
I think here in Philadelphia and across the country, the biggest thing is we're really working at Teach for America to reinstill the belief that all students should have the opportunity for an excellent education, and that is possible. We spend a lot of time talking about the negative examples or things that are going wrong, and not enough time talking about the excellent examples of school change and outcomes and innovation. So I think Teach for America can really play a role in that. I think that we are very grateful to be a part of various coalitions, the Philadelphia Equity Alliance, Read by Fourth, also the City Talent Coalition. I think that Teach for America Philadelphia and with our other partners, we're really at a crossroads of how do we galvanize the city to be aligned on what we want to be true for our schools. And that'll take not just education leaders, business leaders, political leaders, and really having a vision that transcends whoever is superintendent, whoever is mayor, whoever is in charge, because as we talked about before, change takes a long time. And so we have to commit to the type of change that we really want to see and put our resources, time, talent, and treasure behind that. And I think Teach for America can play a role in just being a part of those coalitions. And then finally, on the national level and locally, I mentioned earlier, but really thinking about AI and how does that impact the education profession? How does technology impact education and teaching more broadly as keeping technology or keeping teaching more human-centered and technology as a tool versus the vehicle for all that we're doing. So those are the big three things that are top of mind here in Philadelphia and across the organization.
That is a lot. That is definitely a lot. Well, I always like to close with something quick. What is a piece of advice that you come back to often?
Yeah, so my old mentor, Ms. Wayman, her big saying is, so what, now what? And so that is always in the back of my mind, that anything that comes up, there has to be a third way. So how do we get after it? That doing nothing is not an option.
Perfect way to end. Yes. So what, now what? I love it. Well, thank you so much, Anna, for being here today and doing what you do for Teach for America, for all the students that you impact, both impacted directly and continue to impact. Really appreciate the time. And for those of you who are not subscribers to the Bigger Possibilities podcast, please subscribe. Thank you again, Anna. See you soon.
See you soon.